Saquon has more 60-plus yard rushes this season than the Chiefs have given up 20-plus yard rushes. It is a matchup of strength on strength.
All right, guys, back on the Establish the Pass podcast presented by Clutch Points. I'm your host, Blake Lovell. With me, as always, my co-host, Dillon Reagan, back for Super Bowl 59 predictions. One of our favorite episodes of the year, obviously the biggest game of the year in the NFL, but we get to have some fun, not only just our picks, but it's the fun stuff, Dillon, like Gatorade color, coin toss, and a lot of other fun specials that we'll talk about. In terms of making picks for this big game, it's finally here, and I guess, this is the one we've been waiting for. Chiefs and Eagles have made it to this point. Chiefs favored by 1.5 here, Dillon, and quite a setup as we head into this game.
Yeah, one of my favorite episodes we do every year, not just for the actual discussion of the game, but as you mentioned, for some of the silly props and other maybe less silly props. There are some interesting ones as we were kind of running through it. But yeah, a matchup that we got 2 years ago, even though there's a lot of similarities between these two teams, I feel like enough that things have changed. The NFL changes quickly, and especially the Eagles defense looks a lot different. There's no Jason Kelce. I know there's some fatigue from some fans for Kansas City and maybe even for Philly to an extent, but I couldn't be more excited from just a straight up football perspective. Once we dive into this, I'll, as always, give you the DVOA prediction, which it's razor thin, potentially the closest, even closer than that. When we looked at that Ravens-Bills playoff game that had the ESPN matchup predictor 50-50, I think this one does have the Eagles more of a favorite there, but the DVOA ones have this neck and neck, and should be a classic game and hopefully one that will come down to the wire.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun, again, as we go into this matchup with these two. Look, we know the path that got them here. We talk about kind of the Chiefs being a team that we kind of laugh. We're like, man, they're 9-10 against the spread. They've had some of those close calls this year. You just kind of never know how the game's going to play out. But that's just like the game itself, like the actual result. The Chiefs, we know, have won 17 games and lost 2 this season now. Meanwhile, the Eagles have won 17 of their 20 and are 13-7 against the spread heading into this game. So they've been a little more reliable when it comes to that number. But, Dillon, I guess as we start just kind of looking at this matchup between these two teams, we know kind of the history in the Super Bowl between them. And like you said, it's a little different this time around. But I guess what are some of those initial things for you that stand out when we look at this matchup where you've just got playmakers aplenty across the board here for these two teams?
Yeah, first thing that sticks out is last time they didn't have Saquon Barkley in Philadelphia.
Yes, that's
and
true.
The Chiefs, I heard a stat that was insane with Greg Olsen on kind of talking through some of the parts of this game where the Chiefs have given up. Saquon has more 60-plus yard rushes this season than the Chiefs have given up 20-plus yard rushes. It is a matchup of strength on strength in terms of Kansas City's ability to run fit really well. And for especially crazy for a team like Kansas City that does at times like to, obviously gets more exotic with the blitzes on obvious passing situations, but likes to play a lot of too high and limit some of the bigger things. They're not going to be able to do that all game, I don't think, with Saquon, unless they want to not give up those explosives, which is important. But if you're giving up 6-7 yards consistently to Philadelphia, and we didn't see this really happen even against Washington, but they've done this to a lot of teams over the course of the season where they control the game. I don't think unlike a lot of teams where you feel like, man, we're going to run out of time. I'm not as worried with Mahomes on that side. If Philadelphia does get a lead for Kansas City to be able to come back, they did it obviously 2 years ago. This defense is in a different situation. And that another person that wasn't here, Vic Fangio, with what he's been able to do quickly in Philadelphia with that defense and how he's going to have dialed up in this game, I'm really excited for. Those are two things that initially I think about from Kansas City. It's you mentioned the spread stuff, but like this team, they make the critical plays when they need to. It's not, and I will say, at least in the Buffalo game, we didn't do a full breakdown of the championship games afterward, but they really played much better in that game. Every fumble from either team, Buffalo recovered. There was like 5 balls that hit the ground. Buffalo recovered every one. That kind of injury luck. Early downs, Kansas City was much better. I think the first touchdown drive, they didn't have a third down against the Bills. And throughout the game, they were playing in much more manageable situations than Buffalo. And obviously a better designed quick game kind of things. And we know that Andy Reid and this team especially Andy Reid, though, is going to have something dialed up. He had the touchdown, the same kind of play call that won the Super Bowl last year, worked for basically 2 touchdowns against Philadelphia in critical moments down the stretch 2 years ago with the little jet motion inside and immediately breaking back out. I'm sure they're going to have something again. And I will say, it's also in that Bills-Chiefs game that we didn't fully break down. I thought coaching really stuck out in terms of Kansas City's advantage there. I will say, with Fangio, defensive coordinator, I'm not sure they're going to have a similar kind of setup here. This is a tougher defense, a healthier defense in Philadelphia. One of the big things also going in this game is just generally the health of these teams. Philadelphia more banged up just by default because Kansas City has no injury designations going into the Super Bowl. This is the healthiest they've been. You look at how important it's been to have guys like Xavier Worthy and fully healthy and a big instrumental part of this offense. But man, it still comes down to everyone's saying the same thing they did kind of 2 years ago. One team has Mahomes, one team has Andy Reid and these GOATs, but the other team has the full 1-22, maybe the talent advantage. And that's where the Eagles are at. And they've drafted really well, but there are a lot of young defenders on Philadelphia still for all their talent. And at this stage, things can get a little crazy. So maybe we won't have the same slipper. I saw some people joking about, 2 years ago that a lot of people were slipping around that field in Arizona with the turf in New Orleans. That hopefully won't be a concern. So it's just a really fun game, man. I know I'm mostly talking about when the Chiefs have the ball against this Eagles defense, but the other side too, to go back to, where they were 2 years ago, this was a team that kind of was able to overcome a lot of what Spags has done because of their offensive line. And you throw Saquon into that mix, and I know how you're feeling about this game, but I really do think there's a reason that these two teams match up so well. There's a reason, so the DVOA projection has this Philadelphia 24.8 and Kansas City 24.6. So they have it as a 0.2 margin in Philly's favor. And it's really speaks to, again, the Eagles' defense and how good this team has been. Maybe throughout the year, maybe early in the season, their defense not so great since like a few weeks, been amazing. But also speaks to what Kansas City has done. Maybe not every postseason, but especially I would say this one and last year in terms of the regular season. What it looks like on offense, it looks like a completely different thing. That the numbers bore that out. Their regular season offensive DVOA 10.8%. Don't need to dive too far into it, but 3 times better that in the postseason so far. The offensive line looked legit. They're going to have a much tougher challenge though with Jalen Carter and those guys against Philly. It just makes for a game that I really can't be more excited for. I understand people that have the fatigue of the teams, but I think just from if you eliminate that from your mind and just think about the football players on the field and the coaches and what how tough they both, all the problems they create for each other, it just makes for such a fun matchup.
Yeah, it does for sure. And I think you started where I would start in that. I think there's just not another Saquon Barkley on the field. No. And I think that always, for me, in this kind of game is interesting because, yes, we know Mahomes can make the plays that he makes. And, even like a guy like Xavier Worthy, right? I mean, just the speed that he has, they could draw up something where he just takes off and all of a sudden 75 yards later, the Chiefs just added 6 points. But I think with Barkley, it's just like, man, every time he touches the ball, I feel like, you're thinking, okay, this is that chance now that the Eagles are just going to break through and going to have one of those big plays. Now, again, it's not as though we don't think the Chiefs offense can have big plays, but I mean, statistically though, it's not been as much, maybe at times this year, like we said, just in terms of the overall numbers. And I think that's where you brought in some of the young guys on the Eagles defense. This is a new spot maybe. And, you're facing a guy who's been here a gazillion times in Mahomes and a coach that's been here a gazillion times in Andy Reid. And so it's hard to know exactly what to expect, even if you think you figured out what the Chiefs do offensively. But I don't know, I keep coming back to the Saquon Barkley aspect of this. And I'm like, this just feels like the year of Saquon, where it is just everything this guy does. He's always able to make the big play or kind of the game changing moment. And like we said, that's Patrick Mahomes' MO. But man, Saquon has just been so good that it's hard for me to like look at this and not say, boy, you're probably not going to see a scenario here where the Eagles run away with this game or anything. But do I feel like their upside with Saquon maybe just on paper is a little bit higher, in terms of the offensive aspects with Jalen Hurts and those things, maybe. But then again, I think about it, I'm like, well, I could say that, but Patrick Mahomes has done this time and time again, and it's so hard to know which direction to go here when you're trying to figure out how this game plays out.
It's insanely difficult. Like I didn't make the pick literally till right before we started recording here for sure. Like I didn't have a clear idea of who I thought was going to have the edge. And there's a reason for that, as we just kind of broke down. I think I am really curious to see what the game plan is from Kansas City. I know on the third and, the obvious passing situations that Spags is going to have some fun stuff happening. But how they get to those spots and how often they do, I think, is maybe the story of that when the Eagles have the ball. Are they going to go completely the opposite of Bill Belichick's famous Super Bowl 25 against the Bills game plan, where it basically was just stopping the pass at all costs? They didn't realize it till too late for the Bills that they could just hand the ball off to Thurman Thomas and get tons of yards. Are they going to do the complete opposite and just sell out to do anything they can to stop Saquon? Yeah. And then that puts the ball in Jalen's court, where we saw him. Some of the most pivotal plays against Washington, I thought it was one of the best games he played all year. Some of the most pivotal plays were, the fourth down go ball to A.J. Brown. Yes, he got open, but he made some big time throws. And we saw that at times in the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. I just really curious, are they going to – I don't know. I feel like you have to stop Saquon, because if you don't – it all starts there. I mean, we saw what happened in the Rams game. Obviously, the Rams had a chance late, but nonetheless, those really long touchdowns that were broken by Saquon. I don't think you're going to have the same gaps with just given the way that Kansas City's built. But I really, that could be one of the most pivotal things of the game. Are they able to get to those third and 6, 3rd and 7 situation? I guess even on 3rd and 6, the Eagles with the tush push can at times just run the ball. We saw that a couple of years ago in the Super Bowl. They went for a number of 4th downs and easily got them. A little different without Kelsey, but they're still very effective. But getting to those spots, how do they get? That's the number one issue with the Eagles. They're always playing in these advantageous situations because of what Saquon can do, because of what they do on the early downs. And it's not like this is a team that doesn't have a ton of talent outside. Like a lot of teams would love to have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. So it is, again, 1-22, such a really, ridiculously talented group. I will say you're talking about the explosives from Kansas City. It's almost fitting because a lot of this starts with, Fangio with go back to some of the, I was going to bring it back to the Rams, but it is related to Mahomes too. With a lot of the explosive plays that were happening in 2018-19, we saw really with Brandon Staley with the Rams, and obviously with Fangio with the Bears before that, and through his time as a coordinator in Miami and now back here in Philadelphia, that he's really the too high master that has forced teams to not have the explosives that they want to have. And it's also led to, for everything that we say about Mahomes, it doesn't look the same as it used to. He is probably the best guy at just taking these 4, 5, 6 yard plays. We saw it constantly against Buffalo, but he's one of the best at dissecting this kind of defense now. It was a defense that was almost by necessity put together to stop guys like Mahomes, and now he's still having success. So it's just such a fun game, and I guess I'll just go into my pick without going too many circles, because you can really find on every level of this game you can find something fun to talk about. But ultimately, when I came down to the pick, I was thinking these whole 2 weeks I was going to put Philadelphia. And then it was kind of like last year, same thing. I was thinking I was going to put the Niners for 2 weeks. And then around this time, I was like, I just can't pick against Patrick and Andy again. I just did it in the championship game. You didn't. You had them beating the Bills. I went with Buffalo. I thought they were going to break through. And obviously a few plays, maybe they do. But I just don't know if I can pick against them in this spot until I see them not have a situation like Super Bowl 55 where they just get overwhelmed up front. Obviously, their offensive line in a much better spot than that. It's going to be a test with Jalen Carter. In some things, people debating whether Tooney should be kicked inside from tackle just to help go strength on strength with Carter. I don't know if that really makes a huge difference with how good Jalen Carter is and with the continuity they have there. Maybe there are some edges that are going to fall apart with that line. If the Eagles' a defensive line has the game of their lives, maybe I'll be regretting this pick. But for now, I'm going to go with the Chiefs here, man. I don't know if this is going to happen, but I feel like I have to stick with Andy and Pat and also Spagnuolo in this defense that I think deserves a ton of credit for what it's become. And it's a really big challenge for them, though, against Philadelphia. I do think that either way, this game's going to come down like it did 2 years ago to the final drive. It's probably going to be a very similar situation.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, again, there's a reason this is, Super Bowl spread's always kind of fascinating, but it is a 1.5 point spread here. And I think when you look at kind of the way these two teams match up, as we talked about, there's just a lot of things, similarities in terms of what they could do offensively. And, again, it's a game of plays. And I think just one big play from this guy or that guy, can change the entire dynamic of the game. I picked the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl yet again in the preseason. I mean, I don't know how many years in a row I feel like I've done it, but I'm like, until somebody proves me wrong, I'm just going to keep picking them. And so I'm going to stick with that pick. I'm not going to change that now with the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl as my preseason pick, Dylan. But I can change my pick for this actual game. And believe it or not, I think the first time I've done this, usually in most years, I have been like, all right, I picked them to win it all. I'm sticking with it until I see it not happen. But I'm with you. The last 2 weeks, I was just convinced I was going to pick the Eagles. And I just think the more I think about it, I'm going to pick the Eagles. And I'm kind of surprised by that because normally I don't do that. But there is just something I feel like about this Philadelphia team that with Saquon, I think it's a different dynamic. And I feel like in this kind of moment, in this game, yes, you can be like, well, he's not been in the spot before. But I think on any sort of drive, we know what he can do. And when you combine that with Jalen Hurts and their ability to get creative here, I think offensively, and maybe I am also banking on the idea that maybe there are some things that the Eagles defense can do here to disrupt what Kansas City wants to do on offense. I will use that combination to pick the Eagles. But as you noted too, Dylan, when I made this choice, it's the ultimate emotional hedge where if the Chiefs win it, well, that was my preseason pick. But if the Eagles win it, then I'm like, all right, I'm going to pick the Eagles to win the game. So I'm like hedging my bets here on this. But I don't know. There is something about the Eagles. I'm going to take a chance. I don't like picking against Patrick Mahomes. It's usually a recipe for disaster. But I will pick the Eagles here to find a way.
I will. Some reason as you were going through that, there's one game that popped into my head fairly recently that has, if it does go that way for them, this actually, the Chiefs won this game, but a game that if it does go this way, it's possible. We saw it in the whole second half of the AFC title game last year. Baltimore didn't give up anything to Kansas City for an entire half, and it didn't matter because of a fumble at the goal line and some other mistakes from Lamar. Things that they addressed they hope to address with Derrick Henry and what their team became, how versatile they became. If they play later in this past season, I'm very curious to see what Baltimore would have done against Kansas City. But I do think we saw the Ravens get pushed around by Philadelphia later in the season. There is a chance that this defense for Philadelphia is just too good and makes enough plays and is strong enough 1 through 11 that they create enough problems that even if the offense for Philadelphia doesn't go completely off, they still do enough because their defense is the story of the game. They're the number one DVOA defense, and weighted DVOA in particular, at least. I think there's at least a possibility that we're looking at that second half and just different things that are happening with Kansas City, and it's just not their stop and start. And if that happens, maybe Philadelphia does get the lead and it goes your way. So I can talk myself into either scenario, but that Philadelphia, that game against the Ravens later in the season was maybe one of the most telling games about the strength of this team, that they are not like, we keep talking about how the AFC is so strong and has these cyborg quarterbacks and superpowers and all this stuff. But they went on the field and pushed the Ravens around. Not a lot of teams did that last season. Even if the Ravens lost 5 games in the regular season, not a lot of teams are really pushing them around, and Philadelphia did. And maybe this is just their one last guy to conquer at the end of the road.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of reasons I could give you to pick the Chiefs, and it's just, again, these two teams are here where they are for a reason, and so there you go. There are picks for the game itself.
Have you played Pick 6 from DraftKings? What are you waiting for? You better get on it. It's Super Bowl 59, the last time to play NFL Pick 6 this season. As the official daily fantasy sports partner of the NFL, DraftKings does fantasy sports like no one else. Play for better payouts on Pick 6. It's super easy to get started. Select 2 or more players, choose if they'll have more or less of a stat, like touchdowns, yardage, sacks, and more. Pick 6 is available in most states, including Missouri, California, Texas, Georgia, and more. And DraftKings is making it even sweeter for first-timers. New Pick 6 customers play $5 to get $59 in Pick 6 credits. Win more cash on Pick 6. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app and use code ESTABLISH. That's code ESTABLISH for new customers to play $5 and get $59 in Pick 6 credits. Only on DraftKings Pick 6, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
But of course, Dylan, we got to go beyond just the pick for the winner. We got to make some other picks when it comes to, fun props and all that kind of stuff for the biggest game of the year. So that takes us to the Super Bowl MVP. And look, for me, I think it's if I'm picking the Eagles, I'm going to stick with the Saquon thing. Obviously, you would expect if it's going to be the Eagles, it's probably going to be Jalen Hurts or Saquon. Who gets the Super Bowl MVP? I'll pick Saquon for my choice.
Yeah, I kind of went with, the situation of either winning. You could probably, if you wanted to, take your MVP pick here and parlay together with your pick for the winner at least. I don't know. I guess you could go on the spread. Maybe the Chiefs win by 1, and then you're out of luck. But I will say if the Chiefs win, it's obviously going to be Patrick. They don't have a guy that, even last year, I don't know what his final numbers were, but he still won Super Bowl MVP, right? Didn't have the most dominant performance. I don't know if there's a Cooper Kupp, Saquon kind of guy on Kansas City that's going to have, it's just the way that even with Kelsey, it hasn't looked as, I don't see, even if he has a really good game, I don't think the numbers, if he does, then so is Patrick, right? So, I think I got to go with Mahomes if the Chiefs win. If the Eagles do, I'm with you with Saquon. I initially was kind of looking between him and Hurts. And, I mean, there is a world where Kansas City does sell out to stop the run at all costs, and we do see Hurts tally some big numbers and ultimately get the MVP. Even maybe he gets a rushing touchdown on a tush push. But I still think Saquon it's the storyline of him and what he's meant to Philadelphia, and that taking the amazing amazing running back and giving him the best maybe run blocking offensive line in the league and what that can look like. And it's pretty amazing. And I do think there's at least a chance that even if Kansas City has stopped explosives all year, this is a different guy. It's a different cat we're talking about. So I think if the Eagles win, I'd go with Barkley as well.
All right. Now to the ever important Gatorade color. Always one of our favorites each year. You gave me the stat that I think the last time the Eagles won the Super Bowl, the Gatorade color was yellow. And I know what NFL teams think of superstitions. And so if I am anyone working in the Eagles equipment staff or whatever, whoever is in charge of the Gatorade, they know that. They know it was yellow. Bring it back. Give me the yellow again for my pick for this one.
Yeah, and I like it with the plus 250, it looks like on DraftKings. Orange tied up there, but it hasn't been orange since the Chiefs won their first of these previous 3 Super Bowls in 5 seasons. So I stick with purple, though. It was purple the last 2 years. Same reason with the superstition. I feel like as they go for a three-peat, the first and Super Bowl era ever, Packer fans will point out that they had a couple three-peats if you include pre-Super Bowl era and the first 2 Super Bowls and the year before that. But in the Super Bowl era, so I will go with purple to go along with my Chiefs pick because I just have a hard time seeing them switching it up when they already have had such success the last 2 years.
All right, Dylan, the ultimate analysis here. Heads or tails, the coin toss. I'm going heads this year. Man, that's a great breakdown. I think you really
explain why you think that can be the case. They did have. I enjoyed their. They had the coin toss of the winning team as something you could go for too. So I was like, and team to win coin toss and win game as a prop that you could do. So you need to also pick the correct team and instead of picking heads or tails. And also have it tied to the winner, a little fun prop. But I will go with tails because you went with heads. So I feel like I got to go out the opposite end. We'll see. I think the Chiefs are the designated road team. So watch them be they're probably going to pick heads. But we'll see. And then we'll have the opposite of our actual picks.
Well, that may sound like a fun prop, but these are the best ones. Of course, DraftKings has their Swifty specials this year because you're just not going to be able to beat those. There's only one of these that is at minus money on this, and that is 15. So they're doing these, of course, by Taylor Swift songs. And the only one at minus 175 right now. All the rest of these are plus money. Minus 175, Patrick Mahomes to have 15 or more rushing yards plus 215 passing yards. So I think that does feel like one that you feel pretty confident about.
Yeah.
Him hitting those two numbers. So I can see why that's the only one, because the next one is it over now? So again, another Taylor Swift specialty. Plus 225 for the Chiefs to lead by 14 or more points in this game. I want no part of that one. So,
yeah, that one I'm not feeling too good about. I just think the game's going to stay close throughout. I think maybe Philly could get a lead, kind of like they did 2 years ago, and the Chiefs fight back. That feels like a little more likely. We've seen Kansas City fall down in some of these Super Bowls. So, like you said, that first one. I mean, even when he struggled to throw at times last year, Patrick ended up, I was just looking it up, 333 yards passing. We know in these big games, especially in the Super Bowl, he always has that one magical run at the key moment. He'd had it against Philly and San Francisco on the game-winning drives the last couple Super Bowls. 15, that seems that one. I mean, just like book it. I know it's minus 175, but you're feeling. I'm going to be shocked if he doesn't hit that. It would have to, take a lot of crazy circumstances and a much different game than I'm envisioning watching for that to happen. But yeah, there's they got some interesting ones. Looking at some of these, deja vu, the Chiefs to win by exactly 3 points.
See, I was going
to
bring up that one. That's plus 750.
Yeah.
So you could theoretically at plus 750 do that. They also have the one with 7, winning margin to be exactly 7 points. That one's plus 700. So it's like, maybe just take a shot on both of those and you're maybe still going to come out okay because those are just, numbers wise, a 3 or 7 point victory seems likely for the winner, you would think, from a probability standpoint. So I think those are two interesting ones to consider here.
Yeah, those ones stick out more so than a lot of the Taylor Swift ones that are going further in, like the great going down. This should be much better. This should be a better odd. You should get paid out way more if this somehow happens. The last great American dynasty, Chiefs win by 22 plus points. You should be getting insane amounts of money.
Way more than
plus 1,200. Come on,
no,
that's not enough in the stratosphere.
No.
I'm staying away, but there's some fun ones. Anti-hero with Jalen Hurts throwing 3 passing touchdowns and scoring a rushing touchdown. That's a lot. We'll get into some of these other props, but that one a little crazy. But I still might think it's more likely than the Chiefs winning by 22 plus. And that's not to take away from the Chiefs. That's just that would be. I have a hard time seeing a blowout on either side, to be fair, but especially from Kansas City.
Look, I think that if you want to take a shot at the biggest long shots here, I don't think they're that wild to really consider. Wildest Dreams is the wild one. So,
the highest
again,
one.
I don't think it's that way. Plus 9,000 for Travis Kelce to score the first touchdown and the last touchdown. Like, I mean, if we're thinking the Chiefs are going to score, it's not unrealistic to think that Kelce's going to score a couple touchdowns in this game. And for him to score the first one and the last one of the game, I think that's maybe worth taking a shot on too. If you want to just, take a chance. Then you've got a lot of other Travis Kelce ones. It's like, You Belong With Me, Travis Kelce to score the first and second touchdown. To me, that feels like maybe longer odds than him just scoring the first and last touchdown. But it's not. Actually, there are better odds on that. Kelce to have at least 20 receiving yards in each quarter. Plus 5,000. It's an interesting one to think about. I like the Saquon Barkley ones, of course, because I'm picking the Eagles and thinking he could have a big game. But, Saquon to have a 50 or plus yard long rush plus 350, I'd maybe want a little bit higher on that. Even though we know he can do it, it's probably not enough maybe to appeal to me there with that number. But for Saquon to have 20 or more rushing yards in each quarter, also plus 350, again, I'd like that to be a little bit higher. But these are, again, some of these are interesting because you just don't know how it's going to play out. But I do like looking at sort of the more absurd ones and really seeing if there's value there in some of these. But
yeah, and I mean, the any quarter 22 plus one, that one is maybe, I again want a little better odds. A 14-7, so that's 21-point quarter with 3 touchdowns. I don't know how many you're going to get of those. I mean, maybe there's one crazy one, but I would still think that'd be a little better than plus 350. Yeah, the 20, I mean, there's a chance that Saquon gets, multiple 20 plus 20 rush yard plays, but for one to be like spread out each quarter, again, I would think the odds would need to be a bit better for me. So yeah, take that first Patrick Mahomes one. But then also I think, the more I go down, some of the better value looks to be like the Chiefs winning by exactly 3 or either team winning by 7. I think those two, pair them up, don't have to put too much on it with the plus 750 and kind of go from there. And yeah, if you want to get crazy with the Kelsey one, it's probably better than, maybe Xavier Worthy. They have one for him with your own kid getting 10 receptions in a rushing attempt. I don't think the rushing attempt's that crazy. I do think 10 receptions might be a bit high for the way they use him, but at least it's possible. But yeah, it's fun. They did a good job going all out with all the jokes here and all the Taylor Swift references.
There's one of the trending specials. Patrick Mahomes to have a long rush of 20 or more yards. Jalen Hurts to have a long rush of 20 or more yards. Plus 1,000. I don't think it's decent value. I think for both of those guys just to scamper for 20, 21 yards. I don't think that's unrealistic. So that's interesting. I like that one. But I mean, again, and when you look at some of these others, I mean, it's sort of just, again, there's so many different combinations of what you can work with. Like they're just a bunch of sort of wild ones out there in terms of just, what you could get from these teams. Like look at some of the team specials, like then where you start going into, all right, do the Chiefs over or under 354.5 yards, right? Minus 115 on both of those. Who controls the time of possession? All those ones. You're not getting a lot of really big odds on with that. So yeah, like that's when you start getting into the territory of some of those. And of course you can also bet on like Super Bowl records. So is anyone going to set records? Who's going to break the passing yard record, which is 506 or more, 216 receiving yards, 205 rushing yards. It's just like, I mean, come on.
205 rushing yards. If Saquon has I do think it's a tough matchup for that, but there's a world where that happens. If I'm not mistaken, that's Timmy Smith and Super Bowl 22 for the old Washington Redskins against the Broncos. But that one, I mean, that record's been around for a long time. That at least there's a shot with Saquon. Watch me say this and ends up being under 100 yards. But one of these that I liked was, I think it was under the rushing specials. Yeah, fastest ball carrier. I do think there's a chance at Saquon and not Worthy. He's the favorite at plus 225. But if he breaks even one of these runs and just really takes off, even if it's not all the way for a touchdown, but if he gets like 30, 40 yards, I'd feel pretty good about going with the favorite there. I know it's not as fun to go with some of these like crazy long odds ones, but I just don't feel great about basically anyone else topping him except for maybe Worthy, and maybe Marquise Brown at plus 1,100 would be an interesting one if the other two guys get bottled up a bit and he has one deep shot or one where he just kind of breaks free from the team. But I'm feeling good about Saquon there. One that I was looking at before we started that I mentioned to you, I felt pretty good about. There's I think it's on the TD scores tab that DraftKings has. They have combined touchdown specials. They have one with Saquon and Hurts combined for 3+ touchdowns plus 215. I think that's going to happen. There's somewhere you can do the 2+ touchdowns for minus 145 for those guys. I think you take that extra one because all it takes is them to get inside the 10, and it's probably one of the two scoring. So I feel decent about the 3-1. Again, even if the Chiefs defense can slow down some of the explosives, I still think we're going to have a similar 34, 31, 38, 35, like it was last time, kind of score ultimately between these two teams. So I feel decently about that one. They got some other ones, but with Kelsey and Worthy or Saquon and Marquise Brown, all sorts of crazy stuff. But I feel like the one that's the safest to think about is just, all right, when the Eagles are down here, it's 1 or 2 guys probably running the ball in. So I'd feel decent about that one. But like you said, there's no limit to the number of odds or different props you can find here. Some crazy ones about, the first touchdown score and the second touchdown score. Maybe some ones there, unlike that one where you, like you said, with Kelsey, where having both is kind of a little crazy, but having, say, Kelsey and then Kelsey to score first and Saquon to score the second one, plus 2,800. If you want to get fun and think like, all right, let me just pick one player on each team. Sure. I think that one could be an interesting one. Kareem Hunt and Saquon's plus 3,000 for them to be the score first and score second. It does matter what order they go in, to be clear. You can't have pick the two guys from what I can tell. I mean, I guess you could just pick both sides of it if you really wanted to. But there's some interesting ones there where start to think about what the teams are going to look like game plan wise and who's the most likely scorer. Also, they have first team touchdown score. So like the first Chiefs touchdown, the first Eagles touchdown. Saquon easily the favorite to score the first Eagles touchdown at plus 185. So maybe you want to get interesting and go with one of the receivers, AJ Brown's plus 500, Devonta Smith plus 750 to go score the first Eagles touchdown. It doesn't have to be the first touchdown of the game, to be clear there. With the Chiefs, Kelsey's the favorite. Honestly, I'd be going Pacheco at plus 800. That one feels like decent value for the first Chiefs touchdown versus all the receivers and Kareem Hunt there, but towards the top. But you can just keep going and going for endlessly with the amount of props they have here. No shortage provided for the Super Bowl.
The Eagles, by the way, too, are 22nd in the NFL in first quarter points, so they tend to start a little slow sometimes. Only 5 points per game in the first quarter is the average, whereas the Chiefs defense in the top 8 there in first quarter points allowed. So maybe something, if you're going to do the order, maybe pick the Chiefs first. And then if you want to go with a dramatic ending to the game, either team to kick a winning field goal, walk off at the end of the fourth quarter, plus 650. I don't think that's a worst idea either, that someone kicks a game winning field goal to win between two teams like this.
Do you get screwed if there's like 1 second on the clock, though? That's, I guess, that's the fine print. That happened a couple years ago. That's happened with, I think, the second Vinatieri one, Super Bowl 38. There was a few seconds left. So I would think about it, but I'd want a little more value just because of the chance that there's 1 second left on the clock. Here we go. But
you really got to do a study on the clock operator on this one. You got to get some research to see if he's someone. Is he quick? Is he quick on the stop button, or is he a little? Maybe you got to know that.
Even the first Vinatieri game winner, I feel like the clock operators were a little more liberal with letting it run back in the day. But that one, I believe there's 7 seconds left, and they just let it go when he made that kick against the Rams. So, they're a little tighter with it nowadays. So, but I like where your head's at there. That one definitely has a chance.
We're at the shot. So there you go. All right. We have some fun, as always, as we said, with these prop bets. There are plenty of them. Like I said, at DraftKings, you can check out the full list there for sure. Of course, you can also check out everything over at Clutch Points to get you ready for the big game coming up on Sunday. Dylan, let everybody know where they can find all that.
Yeah, you can go to clutchpoints.com to our NFL section. Tons of breakdown of this game from every angle possible, covering all the reactions, quotes from these teams leading up to the game. They know each other well, so it's been pretty tight ship from so far with the quotes. So maybe we'll get some fiery stuff over the next few days. Obviously, still, if you're a fan of the other 30 teams, plenty looking ahead to free agency, the draft, where Myles Garrett and Cooper Kupp might end up. All that broken down in Clutch Points NFL section and in the NFL section of the Clutch Points app.
Yep, check it all out there. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. Any podcast app you use, search for Establish the Pass. And thanks as always for listening. We'll talk to you next time on the Establish the Pass podcast.